Lions Nation, what is going on? Welcome to the Lions Pulse. I am your host, Miko, and we are back once again for another week of talking Detroit Lions. It's a really gloomy Friday. It's been one of those really rainy days here in Michigan, but I can't even lie to you guys. It's been a really good day for myself. So hopefully you guys have also been having a great Friday. As you guys come into the channel, for those of you who are, regulars here, you guys already know what to do. Be sure to hit that like button. Be sure to hit that notification bell. Also, if you're new here, subscribe to the channel. And then hop into the chat because all of those things really help out me and this channel as we kind of been growing things along. Again, only been doing the solo YouTube thing for almost 2 months now. And I can't even lie to you guys. I'm super excited and super happy with where the channel is at this point. You guys have really helped me out in growing this platform. So I'm really excited to be able to get into things today, talk some Lions with you all. And we got some really good things to talk about. Also, wanted to address something from the last stream. Uh, Apparently, StreamYard was playing with me. I'm sitting here talking and thinking that I only had a very small audience of people hanging out with me, so wasn't seeing any chat comments come through or anything like that. I can promise you that will not be the case today. I have StreamYard up on this screen. I have my the YouTube stream up over here, so got my bases covered as far as being able to monitor the chat, being able to see what everybody is saying. But again, really appreciate you guys hanging out today. Again, hit the like button, as you kind of come in, and then jump into the chat because I really want to have a real good conversation about our Detroit Lions and specifically if you've seen what the thumbnail is talking about. We're going to talk about, again, does this team have enough to win it all? And based off of the talent and just the evaluation that we kind of have currently, what is the realistic expectation that we should have for the Detroit Lions? So really excited to kind of get in there. First and foremost, though, got to give a shout out to my guy, Det Fan Man, saying, so within the NFC North, what positional group, if any, do we think it's even arguable the Lions may rank last? Yeah, we're gonna get into that because the thing that kind of, and shout out to you, Det Fan Man, for jumping in the chat and being here tonight as we kind of kick off this stream. But the thing that kind of kicked off the main topic of this stream, right, was that CBS Sports dropped their top 100 players of 2023 list earlier this week. And I initially missed it. And then, kind of getting a chance to look at it, over the course of the week later in the week and really just trying to see okay, how many Lions players made it? Did any players make it at all? And when going over the list, lo and behold, two Lions players did make CBS's top 100 list for 2023. And those players being Penei Sewell and Amon-Ra St. Brown. And again, of all the players that could have made this list, those two make the most sense, by far make the most sense. And so the thing, though, that I started wondering was like, okay, so this is how many players the Lions had make the list. And then you kind of understand where they fell, 9-8, a game shy of really getting into the postseason. And even though they were playing good football, again, winning 8 out of 10, a lot of people thought they would make some noise in the playoffs. We do remember how that season started, and they very much looked like a team that kind of was playing catch up. It didn't quite have it all together as far as a contending team. But down the stretch, they definitely were starting to put it together. So going into this year, or going into this upcoming season, the 2023 season, we're all really high on this team. We're all really optimistic about what this team can accomplish. Again, it's rare that you see anybody predict the Lions having less than 9 or 10 wins. A lot of people think the Lions are going to make some noise. But when I start to look at this team from a talent perspective, I really do start to wonder, like, okay, looking specifically at the NFC, and kind of a fan man saying looking at the NFC North, but I want to start with I'm going to go big picture and then we can kind of like zoom in later. But looking at the NFC as a whole, like, okay, in comparison to other teams, how many players did the other teams in the NFC have make this list? And let me pull it up for you guys really quick because the numbers I think will kind of give you a good idea, and I think it would kind of help you understand exactly where the Lions might fall as far as the hierarchy of talent in the NFC. So I try to just focus on teams that were either in the playoffs or that we expect to be in the playoffs this upcoming season. And so first we got to start with the team that represented the NFC in the playoffs, that being the Philadelphia Eagles. The Philadelphia Eagles had 9 players make CBS's top 100 list, right? The 49ers who they beat to on their way to the Super Bowl had 6 players make this list. The Cowboys had 4 and the Giants had 3. Now, again, I already said like the Lions only had 2 players, right? Penei Sewell, Amon-Ra St. Brown. So no one on the defensive side of the football. Aiden Hutchinson was listed as like an honorable mention. But if I'm being like honest, CBS put so many players in this honorable mention section that I was like, okay, this no longer seems reputable by any case. So it was really kind of interesting to me to be able to look at it and be like, okay, looking at where the Lions are and looking at where like the 49ers and the Eagles are, especially, like that's a big gap, right? We're talking 9 players for the Eagles, 6 players for the 49ers, and only 2 for the Lions. There's a lot of ground to be made up just in the simple fact of talent. That's a big ground to make up in that sense of like, okay, where are the Lions going to get this influx of performance, every given Sun or any given Sunday to be able to start to make this push, to make the playoffs, to win the division, to win the NFC and hopefully get into the Super Bowl. And I'm not sure outside of again, I think they have one of the best offensive lines in football, right? The combination of Penei Sewell, Frank Ragnow, Jonah Jackson, Taylor Decker, and we're hoping for a healthy Big V. That group is a group that I would put up against anybody in the NFL. And again, you're probably looking at maybe the second, third best unit as far as like an entire unit. Um, and Penei Sewell is probably like he made this list is probably your best offensive lineman. Probably, second on that list is probably Frank when he's healthy. And I think it's kind of like a little odd that Frank didn't make this list. Um, just because I mean, again, I think Frank Ragnow is again one of the better centers in the NFL, arguably top 5 centers in the NFL altogether. And but outside of that, like Dev Famine was asking, like, what position group, realistically do we think the Lions have a top unit in? Um, and again, looking at the NFC or looking at the NFC North, I think the Lions probably have the best wide receiver core, right? In the NFC North. If we're looking at offensive line, like I said, I think they have the best in the NFC North, the best offensive line. Defensive line, I mean, we kind of talked about it, earlier this week. There's a lot of question marks for me, specifically in the middle of the defensive line. I think Aiden's probably one of the better pass rushers in the NFC North. I think you can probably, it's a toss up maybe between him and Daniil Hunter, but I think I would give it to Aiden right now just because Aiden's younger and I think I like what he's able to provide, for the long term. But I don't know if they necessarily have the best defensive line, and if it is, it's not by like a huge margin, right? It's like, okay, well, you may have the best defensive line in the NFC North because not many other defensive lines in this division scare you. But then again, you start to back out, and it's like, well, their defensive line is not sniffing Phillies by any stretch of the imagination. They're not coming anywhere close to what San Francisco is putting out there. They're not even coming close to what Dallas or the Giants are putting out there every single Sunday. And that's one of those things where it's like, yo, one of the big deciding factors for this team to be good this upcoming season is this defense. And if this defensive line is not somewhere where you're like, oh, it's one of the best in the division, well, now this starts to kind of make the season look a little different because you start to kind of wonder, okay, where are these playmakers going to come from? Like I said, I trust that Aiden's going to, be showing up every Sunday, putting in maximum effort and all those things. But again, who's the guys next to him? Who's the guys opposite him that are actually going to help elevate this unit so that it becomes something that's to be feared, as we kind of go into the season. Real quick, want to give some shout outs real quick. Super Saiyan Lion saying, "What up, Miko? What's good with you, man? Hope you enjoying your Friday." Um, Hatter's House 710 saying, "Yo, what's good with you, man? Appreciate you guys hanging out, checking out the chat, and everything like that." Um, Super Saiyan Lion saying Frank is probably the best O lineman. Um, other than Sewell. Yeah, and that's kind of what I would say. Like I think it's a toss up between him and Penei. We're gonna talk about Penei a little bit more later in the show because I think there's a really interesting conversation to have about Penei as far as how he's viewed across the league. I think he's starting to get there, right? Having, getting his first Pro Bowl nod and everything like that this past year as an alternate or whatnot, but still getting into the Pro Bowl. Um, but I do think like the national perception of Penei is a little skewed. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later. Like I said, as we kind of get into the rest of the show. But as I'm kind of just like going through the different position groups, I believe I saw like an article or something like that a few weeks ago when even like looking at again the wide receiver group. So going back to the offensive side of the ball, I don't know if the Lions have one of the better offensive like wide receiver groups. I think obviously you have Amon-Ra who is like your best receiver, but Josh Reynolds as a number two, number three isn't like isn't nowhere near the quality of like again, I'm going outside of the NFC in this case, but like of a T Higgins, right? Like T Higgins is a different animal when you compare him to Josh Reynolds. Um even looking at looking at Philly, right? AJ Brown, Devonta Smith, like those are clear one and twos. Where in a case with the Lions, you probably have a one and a three. And obviously, we're hoping that JMO after he comes back from his suspension will obviously help elevate this group. And maybe that changes the conversation. Maybe that changes the dynamic of this offense by having, a guy like Amon-Ra he's your clear number one, even though he doesn't line up on the outside, but he's your number one. And you just need a another dangerous number two, which could be Jamison Williams coming into the season. But let's be honest, like this Lions wide receiver core is a one and probably like a bunch of threes and fours. Like if we're being completely honest, again, is TBD in my mind, but everybody else is like a wide receiver three, a wide receiver four on any other team that's not this one. The tight end group, I mean, again, I think we're all really hyped up on Sam Laporta and what he could be, but I mean, again, it's a TBD thing, and it's hard to say like he's going to be one of the better tight ends until we see him playing on Sundays. So and then, I mean, let's go to the quarterback, right? Let's look at Jared Goff. And again, another player that wasn't listed amongst the top 100, which I thought was a little surprising because I get it. Jared didn't have like eye popping numbers, right? Didn't have anything ridiculous, but was really good with not turning over the ball. Had a good, really, really good touchdown to interception ratio. Threw for over 20 touchdowns and things of that nature. So like I get that it's hard for quarterbacks to make this list when there are so many outstanding quarterbacks, but I think Jared Goff, even to an extent, puts you in a situation where you kind of have to wonder, like, hey, is Jared enough to help you win it all? When he's not even considered one of the 100 best, players in the NFL. And I think a lot of us would agree, Jared came off one of his better seasons, one of his best seasons, in his career. So if a performance like that isn't enough to get you like that type of recognition of like, yo, this is one of the better players. Like I said, even if he was in the 80s or the 90s, I think it would justify like this idea that like, hey, maybe he can kind of continue to, improve and get better. And I do think he will be better, or I do think he will be good this season. I don't know how much better Jared gets outside of this. And the only sliver of hope that I think that Jared has of getting like significantly better is by having a weapon like JMO and having JMO available to open up another element of the passing game for the Lions. So where they go from just dinking and dunking and exploiting the middle of the field to really taking these home run type shots and getting it into the hands of playmakers that can like truly, you know, change a game in that sense. Um Super Saiyan Lion saying the 100 list is all biased. And that's very true, right? Like anybody, and I think that's with any list, right? Whether it's top 100, top 10, whatever the case may be, there's always a level of bias that's put into it. But that doesn't mean that there's not also a sliver of truth in it, right? Like, again, Jared Goff may not be on this list, but sure, somebody else might put him on another list. Frank Ragnow might not be on this list, but he may be on somebody else's list. But I think even over the, like, just again, we're in that part of the off season where these types of things are being talked about, where we're reflecting on the season and we're looking at like, hey, who stood out and who didn't. The fact that Jared's not getting a little more respect at this point after the type of season he has, but yet he's one of the reasons that some people feel like this is the team that will, do the impossible is a little interesting to me. And I find it interesting that, more media, I guess when putting these types of lists together, that there isn't more consideration for what he was able to do and what he was able to accomplish. Um, Deaf Fan Man saying, I don't even think Miko was right for calling it the CBS list. It's Pete's opinions list. Honestly, F Pete. And that's fair, right? I mean, again, this is one writer at CBS. So again, possibly somebody else at CBS could come out with a different list. The list that I typically like put a lot of stock into is the players list. Like when the players list out who they believe to be the top 100 players in the NFL, that to me always carries a little more weight because it's your peers and they know the the significance and the importance of any given player to that team. And when that player stands out to your peers, like that always, sings way more or just weighs more in my mind as far as like, okay, if I'm gonna give any level of credibility to this. Um, but going back to Jared Goff and in this question of again, is he enough? Can he do enough? I That will be continue to be the thought process for me as I go into the season. While I'm content and understand that this is the guy that Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes are betting on, and that they have a lot of faith in, and that they've seen a lot of growth in, and we have all seen a lot of growth in, not just them. I do continue to watch him, and I am going to continue to watch him because one, we still have to, deal with the situation of eventually choosing to extend him or not. We have Hendon Hooker waiting in the wings, but the best thing that Jared Goff did last year, in my opinion, was protect the football. And so turnovers, in my opinion, can come in bunches. While he was great at it last year, and I think part of that is from having an offensive line that kept him clean and kept him upright. Another part of that is also having better weapons and having more chemistry. So it's becomes a question of, can Jared continue that trend? Can he continue to, be in rhythm? Can he continue to make these throws and not put the ball in harm's way? And when pressure does come, can he continue to navigate it well? Because while I agree with Dan's assessment that like, yo, Jared's better here than he was in LA, that he's shown growth, he's shown improvement. That's absolutely fair and that's absolutely tangible. And you can actually see that on tape. I still believe that his weaknesses are his weaknesses. And just because they weren't exploited nearly as much last year as they were in 2021 doesn't mean that those things couldn't be exploited this upcoming season. And so for me, the Lions like success and the Lions ability to accomplish their goals very much so hangs on the shoulders of Jared Goff in the sense of A, being healthy, and then B, continuing to protect the football. If Jared falters in any of those two areas, if he's for some reason takes on a bad injury, or if he for some reason is not safe with the football, this season starts to look drastically different than what we all thought it would at the beginning of the year, or how we currently feel right now. Um, and I know that might be safe to say with any quarterback, but I think that's specifically the case when looking at a quarterback that, like, I just think doesn't necessarily. I know there were people that were like at one point in the offseason that were having this conversation of like, yo, is Jared Goff a top 10 quarterback? And it's like, I can't do it yet. I can't. I think he's just outside of that. But I think in the grand scheme of things, like that's what makes me kind of nervous when going into the season of like, yo, can he be relied upon and can he be the guy um that really leads them to the promised land? Shout out to my guy Rumble in the chat saying, what up, Doe? Um, what's good with you, Rumble? Always appreciate seeing you, having you come through. Um, Super Saiyan Line, I knew you were going to say this, and I was waiting for somebody to bring it up. Super Saiyan Line saying Lewis Riddick and Dano have both said that Goff will have a bigger year this season. That's Lewis keeps saying he sees the Lions making the NFC Championship. And I agree. Like, listen, if there's a reason to be optimistic, right? I don't think like Lewis Riddick or Dan Orlovsky are pulling this optimism out of nowhere, right? They're not just like saying this for the sake of saying it. Jared Goff put together a good season of football. And so if there's a reason for you to be optimistic, it's to look at what he did and to say, like, hey, if he keeps playing this way, he can be this is the result that the Lions can achieve. My concern will always be we've gotten to see 2 seasons of 2 different Jared Goffs. Um, and really quick, next week on Monday, I have Mike Payton, formerly of Pride of Detroit, currently at A to Z Sports, coming onto the show. So I'm going to be able to sit down and talk with Mike. But Mike did a really good article for A to Z Sports recently where he kind of compared the Jared Goff his first year in Detroit and then Jared Goff last year. And while there's on one side you can look at this and be like, hey, look how great and look how vast the improvement is from Jared Goff after his first year. And then there's another way that you could look at this and be like, hey, Jared improved, but this other version of him could still possibly exist. And in that first 2021 season, I think if you all remember, there were a lot of interceptions, there were a lot of fumbles, there was just a lot of panic under pressure. And those things in my mind can always creep back up because that's not just dependent on like how you perform, that's also dependent on how teams decide to attack you. And if teams decide to ramp up the aggressiveness and start to ramp up the pass rush, well, again, we have to sit back and see, can Jarrett actually navigate that stuff well? Or was this result that we just got this past year simply from just like having a more comfortable environment to play quarterback within? Def Fan Man saying, I agree. Golf is enough because he is protected by our $70 million O line because Monty and Gibbs are going to make Golf look fine. And we're going to be the Detroit play action passing Lions. Golf is going to ball. And I think, and I'm fine with that, right? Like, I don't want to make this seem like if Jared Goff isn't playing like Patrick Mahomes, then he's not good enough. No, at the end of the day, like win football games. That's all I need you to do is win football games. If that's from Dinkin and Duncan, then like fine. Like as long as at the end of the season, if the Lions are holding up the Lombardi trophy, I'm not gonna care how we got there. But I also will sit here and recognize that like that style of play could also, be altered and that type of play could be blown up if defenses start to cue in on it and they start to scheme for it because they know the limitations of your quarterback. I think one of the things that makes a Philadelphia Eagles so difficult, a team like the 49ers difficult or a team like the Chiefs difficult is that they have quarterbacks or offensive coordinators that put so much pressure on you that it's just like it's not easy to just cue in on what they're doing. And I think that becomes the concern with me with Jared Goff is that like I still think, and maybe it's because we watch him we've gotten to watch him the last 2 years. I do think he's relatively easy to figure out and he's relatively easy to defend and put him into bad situations. Um, it just becomes a matter of do other teams kind of know that and can Ben Johnson help him? And like that fan man is saying, right? Can a combination of Monty and Gibbs and a powerful run game keep him protected so that he doesn't have to do too much? Because I just do believe that Jared Goff is not the type of quarterback that's going to get you to win those types of games if it's completely on his shoulders. It just won't happen enough throughout the course of an 18 game season. Um, Super Saiyan Lion saying he also said Gibbs will be a big factor of this because of how they will use him in the offense. Um, Also continuing saying Gibbs is not just a running back. They will line him up outside and let him fly. Listen, I'm fully well aware of again the versatility of a Jahmyr Gibbs and what they plan on doing with him. I think it will be very much like Alvin Kamara as far as usage, but I do think they're going to have to use him very much like how the Saints use Alvin Kamara. I know a lot of people say, well, hey, they're going to have him run outside or they're going to flare him out wide. The Saints also run Alvin Kamara in the middle, up the middle too. Like, so you're gonna have to do that thing too. And when I say that or people hear that, I feel like everybody bristles because they're just like, well, if you take a running back that small and run him up the middle, he increases his odds of getting hurt. But it also increases the odds of your offense staying unpredictable. If you continue to use Jahmyr Gibbs in the same way every week on the same types of plays, he's no better. I mean, he could be better because he could be more effective, but he's no different than Theo Riddick when Theo Riddick was here, where all Theo did was a couple of different plays, and we all knew when Theo got in the game what he was going to do. So with Jahmyr Gibbs, you have superior athleticism, superior running ability, superior vision, utilize all of that. And as we are kind of going through the off season and going to be getting into training camp soon, this is a perfect time to be ratcheting up his physicality and getting him used to, especially once they put on pads, getting him used to that level of punishment or that level of physicality that, the NFL game is going to present to him. Um, Lions Rumble saying limit turnovers and win the North. And I think I mean, again, it sounds simple, right? Because I feel like that could be the solution to any NFL game, is limit turnovers and you'll win. And there's also an element though where like you also have to push the ball. You still have to be able to march up and down the field. I believe it was I believe it was like actually both New York games, right? The Giants game and uh the Jets game where like the offense wasn't fantastic. Like Jared Goff wasn't marching up and down the field, but he wasn't turning the ball over either. But it's like the scores that they were able to get were largely fueled by the defense putting them on shorter fields and giving them more opportunities. So again, it puts us in a situation where again, I don't need Jared Goff to be Superman and be Patrick Mahomes and throw for 300 yards and do all this, 4 or 5 touchdowns a game type of stuff. But I do need him to be efficient. Like I do need you to not create turnovers, like Rumble's saying, but I also need you to march up and down the field. I need you to be able to not put so much on this defense because again, I'm still not sure what this defense is going to be come week 1, but I know what this offense is capable of. And if Jared Goff can help facilitate that, and if he can continue to be, the conductor that he is and just march them up and down the field, you'll score enough. You'll get enough opportunities to where you'll put points up. And that will be again a winning recipe for the Lions as well. Shout out to my guy Lester White in the chat saying the Lions will be fine as long as they do not turn the ball over. The defense will be improved to an extent. The offense won't after be as good or won't have to be as good as last season's. And I feel like that's like I've been saying that too as well, right? That I feel like the defense is going to be better. And the way we kind of started this stream was like talking about again, do the Lions have enough talent? While I think the defense will be better, I think they've gotten significantly better on the back end. That's where they invested so much money. That's where they went and got veteran help. And so there's a lot of optimism on my end on that group. Now, chemistry is still a big part, and we're gonna have to see how that shows itself once the season starts. But I do think that part of the defense will be significantly better. I do think the linebacker core will be a little bit better, especially if Jack Campbell is starting. I think that will just having a more athletic linebacker in the middle of your defense, I think will work wonders for the Lions, in my opinion. Um, and whether that's sliding Alex Anzalone over to the Will spot or Derek Barnes taking that spot, whatever the case may be, the Lions will get more athletic by simply having Jack Campbell on the field, and that will make it better. Your edges, listen, I expect Aiden to be better, in year 2. I have no idea. I have zero clue who is going to start opposite of him. And that may be a red flag in some senses because personally, selfishly, I would love to see Josh Pascal take that spot. I would just love to see again the guy that you drafted in the second round last year. I want to see why you drafted that guy, and I want to see him live up to the billing of being a second round pick. So selfishly, I would love to see Josh Pascal win that spot, but let's be realistic. It's probably going to be Charles Harris. It's probably going to be Romeo Quara. And we'll just have to see how they come back after having, injury riddled seasons last year. The question for me, and it's a big one as far as like the overarching theme of like, will this defense be better? Is what happens in the middle, because that is the group that hasn't really changed a ton. Like the edges haven't changed a ton either, but you at least gotten healthier on the edges. In the middle was a problem last year, and you haven't quite gotten that much better. There's Broderick Martin for sure, who I'm very optimistic on. I think it's if I'm going to take a flyer on like Brad took a guy that like nobody knows and nobody's really high on, and it just feels like we've been down this road a few times with Brad Holmes already, where he's taken a guy that no one was really familiar with, and that guy turns out to actually be a good football player. I'm kind of going that way with Broderick Martin. So it just becomes a question of how many opportunities, but that group is the one where again, listen, I know that there's still a lot of passing that goes on in the NFL. There's a lot of, again, airing it out and playing on playing on the outside. Teams will still beat you up in the middle. Teams will still find ways of getting yards on the ground, and this was an area where the Lions struggled. We talked about this earlier in the week. The Lions were near last, right, in run defense, and they haven't drastically changed anything. So I can feel confident about a number of areas. And shout out to my guy Luke, because who came back to streaming earlier this week, and he kind of pointed this out as well. And I really agree with him, where he mentioned, like, yo, having a great secondary is awesome, but it means nothing if you're on a lot of like 2nd and 2 and 2nd and 3 and like these short down yardage situations. It really doesn't mean a lot. Having a good secondary is going to show itself when you're in those third and longs and even third and mediums, maybe in some situations. But you need to be able to limit what teams are able to do on the ground. And currently, what they have on the defensive tackle spot is a question. It is something to kind of look at and be like, yo, like, have you done enough in that situation? Because you clearly don't have one of the better defensive tackles, right? This would be different if instead of Aleem McNeil, we were talking about having Quinnen Williams, because we'd be like, well, at least you have Quinnen Williams. With Aleem, it's a question of like, well, hey, will Aleem take this third-year jump? And if Aleem does, then it's like, well, hey, if Aleem takes this jump, then maybe the group as a whole will kind of come into form. So there's those questions to me when it comes to the defense, where it's like I expect them to be improved, but I feel like there's one the Achilles heel of this defense will be the middle of it, right? Will be the defensive tackle spot. And we'll really have to focus in on that as the season starts and see, did the Lions make the right decision by not looking for veteran help or investing more at that spot going into the 2023 season. I went on a much longer rant about that than I thought I would. Let me see what you guys are saying in the chat. Debt Fam Man saying, but it's the BJ matchup advantage plan. 22 man Gibbs, Monty, Laporta, Mitch, Wright, and Amon-Ra JMO. 3 linebackers will see Gibbs line up all over. 5 DBs sets will set Monty and Gibbs rush up their face. Listen, the rushing attack I think will be more dynamic, right? Again, shout out to my guy Luke, who kind of mentioned this when he was streaming, as far as like, should we be more concerned about the mass changeover at the running back spot? And I'm not, because I think your running back situation has gotten more dynamic, because Monty isn't just a run up the middle type of running back. He can do a lot more things. And if you roll out packages where you have Monty and Gibbs, I know we've been, again, clamoring about that for years, but I just think there's so many more dynamic weapons, like Dat Fanman kind of listed, that you kind of are going to be able to really pick apart defenses in that sense, because you're really going to have to hope that you have the personnel to match up with every type of, personnel that the Lions are rolling out offensively. Lester White saying Romeo was a 10 sack guy on a bad team. I'm expecting last season's rookies to make the second year leap, since they can concentrate on football training and not combine training or injury rehab. And Lester, listen, that's why I'm really high on Josh Pascal. You can't tell me that you took a guy in the second round and you didn't expect him to really compete for a starting spot. And I get why you kept Romeo. I get why you kept Charles Harris. They had really good seasons for you, and really just kind of took steps backwards simply due to injury. So I understand why you would, feel confident in them, but Josh Pascal to me is and has always been the future opposite Aiden. And so I'm expecting to get into camp and that to really kind of show itself. I know they like his versatility. I know they're going to want to play him some defensive tackle and things of that nature. But again, this is the team that's built on competition. I would just love to see Josh Pascal take that position over and win the competition. My guy Big T in the building saying, I can't wait till week 1. Listen, man, every week and every day that goes by, I become more and more anxious for Lions football. I'm super excited about it. Def Fan Man again saying the Aiden workout video, no way he does that daily, right? I haven't seen it, so somebody's gonna have to like send it to me and I'll look at it. If it's the one where it's like what he does in the morning, where he does the like the cold plunge and all that type of stuff, I would tend to believe it, right? For people that like work out like pretty consistently, you sometimes get just in this rhythm where like that's just your routine. That's just how your body and your mind works, and you have to do those things week in, week out. Super Saiyan Lion saying Rodrigo we will be better in the second season. My question is he going to be better than Derek Barnes in his second season? Because Derek Barnes, at least again, in early OTAs and things of that nature, seems to have really caught the eye of this coaching staff. And so, listen, Malcolm might be better. Doesn't mean that he'll be better than Derek Barnes potentially, right? Because it looks like Derek Barnes has really taken the jump, which you kind of say in your next comment, right? Barnes looks to be making a jump finally. So again, that's why I'm confident about the linebacker group. I think the linebacker group is one that has really undergone a good transformation as far as, again, you've added Jack, which I think just overall improves your athleticism and playmaking at that position. Like you said, Derek Barnes is making the jump, and Malcolm Rodriguez at the very least showed himself capable of filling in and playing NFL quality football. Like I said, like I think the detriment to Malcolm is that look, with as hard as he plays, with as much grit and physicality that he plays with, which are all the things that this coaching staff loves, his size is still going to show up eventually. Maybe it won't show up on every single play, but it's going to show up throughout the course of a season. And I think that's why they went out and got a Jack Campbell, because they were like, listen, we love what Malcolm brings. We just wish he was a little bit bigger. Um, Lions Rumble saying, I'm glad you put the pause after it, but saying I want the full Monty this year. Yo, at least you didn't say like up your gut or something like then that would have probably like made it worse. But no, listen, man, that's again when I look at this team, there's a number of areas where, like I said, I think the Lions are good in some areas, but I do think we're going to see the thing that could like really kind of cause the season to crash in on Lions fans that I don't think we're talking about nearly enough is that there does seem to be a talent disparity, right? There does seem to be a gap in talent from, again, what the Lions have on their team versus some of the other teams, like again, specifically in the NFC. And if you're just now joining, I kind of listed out earlier, going based off of, the list that was released on CBS Sports about the top 100 players from 2023, the Lions only having 2 players, but then like some of the top teams in the NFC, the Eagles having 9, the 49ers having 6, the Cowboys having 4, the Giants having 3. There's a gap there, right? And there's a gap that, again, maybe, again, having some healthier guys and some guys stepping up will be the thing that helps bridge the gap for the Lions. But it is something that, again, I don't think we talk about nearly enough as like, yo, this is something that the Lions don't it's not like, and I hate to go back at this point, but it's not like when we had Calvin and Matthew, where it was like, well, you knew you had the best wide receiver in football, and you knew you had one of the better young quarterbacks in the NFL. So it's like, well, that tandem in itself can probably win you a lot of games. In this situation with this iteration of the Lions, and I'm not saying this as a bad thing, but it just seems to be the truth, a lot of the things that we're talking about is like, yo, this team just being well coached, having a really good offensive coordinator, having a really good culture, having a really good buy-in system amongst these players. And then you also have like one of the better wide receivers in the NFL. And you do have one of the better offensive linemen, or 2 of the better offensive linemen. I'll say 3, because Taylor Decker doesn't get nearly enough respect. I think you have 3 of the better offensive linemen at their respective positions between Penei Sewell, Frank Ragnow, and Taylor Decker. You just do. And then you do have Amon-Ra St. Brown. And I think we'll see what Jahmyr Gibbs ends up being in the NFL. And I think we'll see what Sam Laporta is on the but that's like the offensive side of the ball. And you have a quarterback that, again, my opinion, he's middle of the road. He has moments where he can be, one of the better quarterbacks in the NFC. But again, how much weight does that have when all of the best quarterbacks are in the AFC? Again, that's not a shot at Jared Goff. It's just, again, taking inventory of the landscape, right? The best quarterbacks seem to play in the AFC. And yeah, some of the better quarterbacks are in the NFC. You have Jalen Hurts, Jared Goff, And then depending on how you feel about Kirk Cousins, Dak Prescott, and a healthy Kyler Murray, like then yeah, sure, you know, position those guys wherever you so feel. Um, shout out to my guy Blue and Silver saying what's up, Miko, and shout out to 1991 Max Stack saying, "What's good, fam? What's good with you guys? Appreciate you all coming into the chat. Be sure to hit the like button if you haven't already. Again, you guys know that helps out the channel so much. And if you're new around here, be sure to subscribe. I typically stream on Mondays and Wednesdays, but schedule got kind of messed up this week. So we're doing, I think we did what Tuesday and Friday this week. So it's something a little different, but I appreciate you all kind of hanging out and spending time with me. Super Saiyan Lion saying with the upgrades they have done with the defense, I believe they can be mid-tier defense, and that's a big plus. And that's again, we talked about that earlier this week. This defense does not have to be top 10, right? It does need to just be middle of the road. And I don't even necessarily put that all on personnel as much as I do. I really put a lot of it on Aaron Glenn. Aaron Glenn has to coach this defense up to be that caliber of defensive, like be that caliber of defense. Because again, Quentin Williams isn't walking through that door today unless the Lions do something crazy, and I would literally lose my mind. But like, you're not getting that ridiculous influx of talent just out of the blue. And so this really, a lot of this gets put on Aaron Glenn because listen, it's different side of the ball, different coaches, different philosophies. There's a lot of things that are different, but that is one of the differences for the offense, right? Like I said earlier, the offense doesn't have one of the best wide receiver cores. They don't have one of the best running back tandems necessarily because it's more so Jahmyr Gibbs is just unproven. You don't have one of the all-star tight ends currently in the NFL, but you have a Ben Johnson that has found a way to scheme up those players in such a way that you're able to then accomplish and be a top 5 offense in the NFL because you have a coordinator that just knows how to move the chess pieces around the best way. That is the thing that Aaron Glenn needs to elevate himself to. Listen, these are the pieces that you wanted, fought for, or feel confident in. It's time to take some pieces. It's time to play chess at a master level and start really elevating your players by making the proper moves, by making the proper strategy moves and game plans to put them in position to succeed going into this 2023 NFL season. So that's kind of again how I kind of feel about the Lions overall talent. I do think it's a concern. I do think their coaching and coaching and culture seem to be the thing that elevate this team and puts them in position to be better than what they may look like on paper. But again, I do think there will be matchups, and that's why, I mean, again, I think that's where the realism comes in, right? Where as much as we may feel like this team is going to win, double digit games, there's none of us that are saying like, hey, they'll win 15, 14 games. Like it comes down to like, well, hey, there are going to be a couple matchups where the talent is just going to be better, probably. And the Lions may lose those games. And I'm fine with that. If you lose because of, like, hey, that team was just a little bit more talented on that given Sunday, then that's right. The phrase any given Sunday exists for a reason. But we can't, you know, stand having a team that gets out coached, whether that's offensively or defensively. That is unacceptable. And you can't have a team where a quarterback is inconsistent, be a part of your team either. That can't be a reason that you're losing games. I want to switch gears really quick, and I want to I teased this earlier in the show, talking specifically about Penei Sewell, right? So Penei Sewell was one of the players that made this list, and I don't know how everybody else feels about Penei Sewell as far as how he's looked at um, in the NFL, but I consistently see lists, whether it's PFF or Bleacher Report or something else, where they're just like, hey, these are the top 5, top 10 tackles in the NFL. And I'm tired of not seeing Penei on these lists. And I have a theory. And you guys let me know if I'm spot on, if I'm crazy, if you guys agree, if you guys disagree. But I'm really starting to think that Penei is being underrated simply because he plays right tackle and not left tackle. Like I truly feel like if Penei was playing left tackle and had been playing left tackle since day one, we would be talking about Penei drastically different. The NFL would be talking about Penei in the same way that they talk about Rashawn Slater, in the same way that they talk about Andrew Thomas. The same way I believe Christian Darrisaw also plays left tackle. Like the way that they hype up these guys and the way that like Penei kind of just seems to be an afterthought is really starting to irk my nerves because while he does play right tackle, I believe he probably plays right tackle better than any other right tackle in the NFL, if I'm being completely honest. Um, that's just how good I think Penei is. And I'm really just starting to feel like, yo, I don't know if the conversation is going to change the minute that Penei switches to left in the event that Taylor ever retires in, in the near future, or not. But even in looking at this list, and I started looking at like, okay, how many tackles were on this list? There were 9 tackles on this list that CBS put together. The writer at CBS put together. Um, Penei was 9 out of those. And listen, I don't know. Maybe I'm biased. I think he's better than Rashawn Slater. I think he's better than Andrew Thomas. I think he's better than Christian Darrisaw. And the fact that like that just doesn't seem to be like the consensus amongst other people, the only thing I can think of is like, well, it's because he plays right tackle. Um, I don't know. And okay, Big T, you agree with me, right? Like he does play right tackle better than anyone else in the NFL, like literally. And it's this the NFL has this weird thing where I feel like they just try to devalue certain positions because it's not the premier one. But in reality, like we have to remember, Panay's playing right tackle because we have Taylor. Like it's not he's not playing left because he can't. He's playing right because you already have a good left tackle, which goes back to my comment earlier about Taylor doesn't get enough respect. Like the same way that we look at Rashawn Slater and we look at Andrew Thomas and things of that nature. I get it. They play left tackle, but we should also look at Rashawn Slater and say, or we should still look at Penei and say, like, yo, he is playing this position at a top tier level. Um, Lester White saying their excuse for Sewell begins and ends with his penalties. And that's like, so listen, this is one thing I will give credence to if this is true. Penei did have a lot of penalties. Now, he didn't have as many. I didn't realize he had that many penalties until I like did the research. Um, Full transparency, like I did this for you guys. I went and got a PFF subscription. Really left a bad taste in my mouth, but like I went and did it anyway. And seeing that Penei had 10 penalties on the season was eye-opening to me because I just didn't recall him having that many. Like I didn't recall the offensive line making a lot of mistakes in general, let alone Penei being one of the main culprits. Um, so if that's an argument, then I think like I guess that's fine, but I still feel like as like again, if we're talking about just like how he plays the position, I still think he plays the position better than anybody else. Um, Blue and Silver asking the question, isn't Slater a right tackle? I don't believe so. I thought he played left, and I could be wrong. I'm looking at it right now. PFF just has him listed at tackle. If somebody else wouldn't mind like checking that out for me really quick and confirm whether or not Rashawn Slater plays right tackle or left tackle. I thought he played left. I thought he played right at Northwestern, but when he got drafted, I thought he played left tackle for the Chargers. Um, but the point that I'm kind of making is that in regards to Penei, it's it's something that I think going into the season, now that he's had that Pro Bowl bid under his belt, I think we start to see Penei be like a consistent Pro Bowler going forward because he's still like again, like a lot of you have kind of agreed with me. He plays the position just better, and he plays it while there's some penalties here and there. And I would have to go back and actually probably like look at every last one of these penalties that Penei got. Because like I said, none of them stand out. Like none of them stand out as like this egregious thing that he was doing. Whether, I don't remember him having a ton of false starts. I don't, remember any like really bad holding penalties. But when you see on this, looking at his stats that he had 10 of them, yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot. And but at the same time, Penei had like the second or third fewest sacks given up at the same time. He also had better, he gave up less pressures and less hurries than some of these other guys, less than, Christian Darrisaw, less than Andrew Thomas. So it's really interesting to me that, like, again, if you want to ding him for the penalties thing, that's fine, but you should also uplift him for the things that he's doing well, which is again limiting pressures and limiting hits, which is also part of his job, which is a big part of his job, right? Um, so that's kind of I kind of wanted to just take some time and kind of rant about Panay because he was on this list, and when I saw that he was 10 out of 10 or 9 out of 9, that just kind of set me off and kind of irritated me. Because I think Panay is a top 5 tackle, regardless of left or right. I think he's a top 5 tackle in the NFL right now. And that might be a little bit of bias. That might be just my Lions fandom showing off, but that's just kind of how I feel about it. Now, one thing where my Lions fandom isn't showing through, and I kind of want to switch gears once again, and this is probably going to set some of you off, all right? Because this is a topic that like I've been skirting around and I've been trying to figure out how to address because listen, I like you guys and I feel like you guys like me, and I don't want to say anything that pisses you guys off. But at the same time, this is a safe space. This is a place where I like to be honest with you guys, and I like to give my honest opinions on certain things. But there is a topic that's been going around since last year that I finally want to dive into, and I want to give my honest opinion on. And it's in regards to our guy Amon-Ra St. Brown, and whether or not he is a top 10 wide receiver in the NFL. Now, I want to go back up. I think it was Super Saiyan Lion who pointed this out. Um, Top 100 lists, top lists, there's a certain level of bias in them. And so if you are sitting here in this chat and you are sitting here saying Amon-Ra St. Brown to you is a top 10 wide receiver, listen, I'm not going to call you crazy. I'm not going to argue with you. I'm not going to, depending on where you have him in your top 10, maybe, but I'm not going to say anything crazy. And I'm not going to call your list stupid. I will say this right now, right here, and it's definitive. You can crucify me if you want to. In my mind, Amon-Ra St. Brown is not a top 10 wide receiver. I think he is closing in on it. I think he could be there as soon as this upcoming year, as far as having another really good year, having another 1,000-yard season. He could definitely start to get into the conversation, but he is not a top 10 wide receiver. He's a top 15 wide receiver. I would even probably argue that he may be even he may end up even being like 13, 12 on my list if I was really listing them out. But I think the thing that we have to understand, or at least this is how I frame it. I'm not even gonna say you have to understand because you don't. Your list is your list. My guy Super Saiyan Lion saying, hell yeah, he is. Listen, if that's how you feel, bro, I'm not even gonna argue with you. I ain't gonna say that listen, that's how you feel about him. That's how you feel about him. I think obviously for us as Lions fans, right? Amon-Ra is a number 1 wide receiver for us. But when I start to look at the NFL and when I start to break down a top 10 list, the first 5 are easy. And so there's not much of a conversation of is he in the top 5? He's not, right? The top 5 to me are very cut and dry, and I won't put them in any order. But when you have Chase, Jefferson, Adams, Diggs, and Tyreek Hill, like that 5 kind of speaks for itself. Then you go into the likes of AJ Brown, you go into the likes of CeeDee Lamb, you have Terry McLaurin, you have Jalen Waddle. Like you start to kind of Cooper Kupp. I get, and again, if you're looking at last season, I can see why you would be like, hey, Cooper Kupp doesn't deserve to be on that list. But when Cooper Kupp is healthy, Cooper Kupp is in this list. Deebo Samuel is in this list. I start to get further and further, and I start to get closer and closer to 10, and I'm starting to find it hard to put Amon-Ra in there outside of just simply saying like, hey, I'm a fan of this team, and I think he should be a top 10 wide receiver. But if I'm being objective, I think Saint is a top 15 wide receiver, and I think he's climbing. I think we all know and understand where he should be and how he should be discussed when talking about his draft class, right? Because his draft class gets talked about with Chase, Waddle, Smith, and then like they kind of stop there. But like Amon-Ra St. Brown is very much in that conversation and needs to be mentioned every time that draft class is discussed when talking about top wide receivers. But when looking at the entirety of the NFL, I just look at Saint as like somebody who still needs to add some things to his game. And the thing that I love about him is I think he's well aware of it too. And I think the things that we've been hearing him say this offseason about, again, wanting to be utilized more as a deep threat and wanting to do more, working on the outside and things like that. To me, those are the things that will help Amon-Ra go from being in the, being a top 15 wide receiver to being a legitimate top 10 wide receiver. He currently in the current form that he has, listen, the man is nearly unguardable. He's a given bucket when it comes down to just attacking the middle of the field, right? Him, Cooper Cup, Debo Samuel are probably like your only like true like guys where it's like, yo, you line them up in the slot and you just know they're gonna get open. You just know they're gonna get yardage. The limitations to his game, and I don't even think it's necessarily a limitation to his game because he did it at USC, but the limitation to the way the offense runs is that he doesn't get put on the outside a lot. So we don't know and we don't get to see again that level of dominance and see if that dominance translates to outside routes enough for him. Um Really quick before I kind of continue on this rant because I do want to I see a lot of you guys throwing in comments here, so I want to see where everybody's at with again my take. Do you agree or not? Uh Hatter's House 710 saying to me he's top 15. I agree. Uh, Blue and Silver, I appreciate you looking into the Rashawn Slater thing, saying you're right. He plays left tackle. He must have been thinking of his college position. Like I said, I think he played right. Rashawn Slater, I believe he played right tackle in at Northwestern, but I think he transferred over to left once he got to the NFL. Super Saiyan Lion saying, I will say he's not better than Cooper Cup. I don't know who started that crazy ish. And that's what I'm saying. Like, there's a level of this where I start to kind of just feel like, listen, man, I love the guy too. I love the way he plays the position. I love the mentality he has. I love the chip on his shoulder. I just cannot, in good conscience, looking at the NFL landscape and being like, yeah, that's a top 10 wide receiver. When top 10s are hard, man. And at some positions, it's harder than others. Wide receiver to me, it's one of the hardest positions to find 10 and say this is the best 10 because there's a level of bias that comes into it. There's a level of bias in it, even with my own list. Because I still like the big bodied wide receivers, right? So Amon-Ra being a little bit smaller doesn't quite make my list in the top 10 just because like there's guys like CD Lamb and there's guys like AJ Brown, there's guys like DK Metcalf that it's like, yo, I kind of like those style of receivers better. And those types of receivers have also made improvements to their game, right? DK Metcalf used to be a guy that could only run like, 9 routes and post routes, and now he's starting to be able to run some of these more nuanced routes that require better footwork. Um, but let me get back in the chat. Miles here saying the fact that a slot receiver is even in the conversation for top 10 shows you how special he is. Absolutely. And I think if we were talking about again who's the best slot receiver in the NFL, there would be a very good claim that Amon-Ra would have there. I think it'd probably be between him and Cooper Cup, but I probably would give it to Saint because I think Saint plays in the slot more than Cooper Cup does. But that would be the conversation right there. Um, Debt Fan Man saying Amon-Ra St. Brown becomes top 10 when he supplants Cooper Cup. Listen, and I don't think it's just Cooper Cup. Like I said, I think there's a lot of other guys on that list. I don't think a lot of people talk about Terry McLaurin, and Terry McLaurin has been just doing his thing in Washington since he got drafted, right? But again, it's a similar situation with like when players play in Detroit. When your team's not winning, no one really talks about you. But when you go look at Terry McLaurin's numbers, he's been doing work literally since the day he got drafted, and he's only gotten better year in and year out. Um, Lester White saying JMO has the physical gifts to possibly be a top 10 in time. But as much as we love St. Brown, he's helped more than anyone by the scheme, not dominant. And I don't listen, and I do think he's helped by the scheme, but I do think there's a level of dominance to it. Like the dude is just guaranteed yardage in the middle. And if you don't, and because he plays in the slot and because it's really hard to double there and everything like that, he does an amazing job at what he does. He doesn't drop a lot of passes. And so I don't want to diminish the level of dominance he shows there. But I think, well, again, when we're talking about complete wide receivers and we're talking about top tens, things get real cutthroat in that situation because there's a lot of really good receivers, and there's a lot of receivers that are currently doing things that Saints just not doing. And again, I don't know if it's because he can't do them. I think it might just be because he's not asked to do them. Um, Super Saiyan Lion saying, "Wait, Cup is not in your top 5?" Um, no, I think he's 6. And again, it's kind of a preference thing, right? Where like I really do like I think Jamar Chase is a freak of nature. Justin Jefferson, obviously, we all know the nightmare that he is in the division. Devontae Adams is still playing at a really high level. Stephon Diggs, and then you have actually I take that back. Nope, I would put Cooper Cup over Tyreek Hill, and that's mainly because I just like the versatility that Cooper Cup provides, right? That he can kind of do everything outside of just run pass coverages. So my bad. Cooper Cup would be my 5 over Tyreek Hill. Um, Blue and Silver saying the problem with Amon-Ra is that he's not a game breaker, but he is one of the best chain movers in the league. Absolutely. And you still need those types of players. Like, I think there's again, some people get offended when it's like, we don't want to give him the top 10, label, but it's like, he doesn't have to be top 10 to still be one of the better NFL, like better one of the better wide receivers in the NFL. Like I said, he's great at getting yardage and being run after catch and doing all of those things. Um, Hatter's House 710 saying he has the biggest chip on his shoulder. Absolutely. And he should. Given what Amon-Ra has accomplished in his NFL career and looking at where he was drafted, that boulder on his shoulder should never, ever shrink. Ever. Um, Super Saiyan Lion saying, I don't think St. Brown is elite at what he does. Wait, I don't think St. Brown is elite. What he does so good is be available. He's always open. He knows where to be all the time, and that's what makes him dangerous. And that's again, and that in itself is a skill. And to be able to do that consistently, time after time after time, to get open, to be able to secure again passes across the middle, because again, you still get hit. Guys still come down and really try to knock Saint loose, but like that toughness shows up, play in and play out. Um, so again, like I don't mean for my comment or my stance of being like, yo, he's not a top 10 wide receiver to be a diss on his ability or his skill set. I still think he's very good at what he does. It's just there are other receivers in the NFL that are better at a wider array of things. Um, Dead Family is saying this kind of feels like your Penei right tackle argument because Amon-Ra St. Brown is a slot guy. You don't give him his worth. If Penei was a left tackle, he would be a league star. The difference though is that like this is by choice, like not by choice, but like again, Penei's playing right because you have a really good left tackle in Taylor Decker. They have just put St. Brown in the slot and he's operated out of there. And I do think, yes, like I said, if you move him outside, if he started to play on the outside more, if he had more plays downfield and it wasn't just the dink and dunk stuff, yeah, I think he would get a lot more recognition because he would show that ability to do more things. Penei Penei can do everything. He just plays right tackle. I don't think, and I think like some of the other guys have said in the chat, I don't know that Saint can do everything, but he does a couple things really, really well, and he does it just better than other players at his position. Um, Lion King saying, I don't think Jared Goff will take us to Vegas. We win the North, a wild card, but it's Hooker. But that's it. Hooker is him. Listen here, I you don't gotta convince me, right? I've watched some tape on Hendon Hooker, did my comparison on Hendon Hooker. If Jared Goff takes this team to the promised land, they get a Super Bowl. Listen, you won't hear me begging for Hendon Hooker. But at the same time, if Jared Goff fell short this season and the Lions didn't accomplish everything we thought they would, and that opened the door for Hendon Hooker, I would be ecstatic because I do think that guy, even as a rookie, would open up, or even as a second year player next year, would unlock a different level to this offense that just Jared Goff can't quite get to. Um, but again, that's an opinion that might ruffle some feathers, but that's just again kind of my opinion right there. Um, Doc Bob in the chat saying Amon-Ra St. Brown is the best slot wide receiver in the NFL. Um, if I were starting a new team and got to select my slot, I would pick him over the rest. The final straw is that he's so young. Future, absolutely. And I think that's another thing that typically goes into like my thought process when I'm thinking about top 10 anything really. It's that when we're talking about a top 10, I typically look at it like this. If you were doing a draft and you had to pick that position first, how likely is it that that player that you're thinking of gets picked in the top 10? And when like I said, when it comes to wide receivers, I'm not sure. I think if you're going to build an offensive scheme where again you're going to utilize the slot position a lot, then yeah, I can see why you would be like, yo, Amon-Ra gets drafted in the top 10, and I would pick him as a top 10 wide receiver because no one's going to be able to cover him in the slot. Wouldn't really be able to disagree with you. But I would also sit back and say, like, yo, a guy like CD Lamb can play in the slot and play on the outside, and he's dangerous in a multitude of areas. A guy like Debo Samuel can play in the slot and play running back. Like, he has this ridiculous versatility. A guy like Cooper Cup, like, the list kind of goes on and on where you start to be like, well, yeah, Saint is really good at that, but are there players that maybe offer something that he just doesn't? And that's where I kind of get to. So first and foremost, I appreciate you guys for not killing me in the chat for my stance. Um, I was expecting like more slings and arrows and people trying to kick me out the pride, but um, yo, I really do appreciate you guys really diving into this conversation with me. JT's massive purpose forgot to give you a shout out earlier. I saw your comment earlier. Appreciate you being in the chat, bro. Love to see your top 10 list of wide receivers. We can do that really quick, right? So I gave my top five, right? Um, Chase, Jefferson, Adams, uh, Diggs, Cup, Tyreek, uh, AJ Brown, DK Metcalf, CD Lamb, Terry McLaurin. That's my 10. Um, and again, like there, like I said, 10 gets really dicey because I think Jalen Waddle has a strong claim, just as strong as a claim as Amon-Ra St. Brown does, right? Jalen Waddle has a really strong claim. Devonta Smith has a claim. I don't know if it's as strong as Jalen Waddle's and Amon-Ra St. Brown, but he has a claim, right? He's had, I believe, back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons as well. So, he's someone else that you could throw in the mix. Um, Again, DeAndre Hopkins is older, but again, when he's healthy and he's right, one of the better wide receivers. I don't think I would have him at 10, but some people are still going to kind of hang on to that. Um, so yeah, like I said, like, and then you can look at the young guys, right? How do you feel about Garrett Wilson? How do you feel about Chris Olave? How do you feel about Drake London? Um, Again, some of those guys maybe they haven't proven it yet, but I think they've shown that they have really good ability in this league as well. So top 10 wide receivers, like I said, we could, like I said, I think if we did top 10 lists of any position, things start to get really dicey the closer you get to 10 because you're really starting to split hairs and your bias is probably going to start showing in some regard. Um, Lion King saying Lions secondary on paper is better than the 1985 Chicago Bears. I'm going to take your word for it because I wasn't quite yet born, right? 1985 is 4 years before I came to be. So I'm gonna take your word for it. But I do think it's a really impressive secondary, and it's a secondary that I'm excited to kind of see on the field. And I think the Lions should have the best secondary in the NFC North. I know Jair Alexander is probably the best corner in the NFC North, but if we're talking about an entire secondary unit, I think the Lions should go into 2023 with the best secondary. Um, Doc Bob saying, I think he would do a great reverse like Brett Perriman used to be so great at it. Yeah, and I like listen, I think I think because of I almost kind of feel like the backlash or the heat that kind of came about when Debo Samuel was doing his contract and they were using him a lot as like a running back and a wide receiver. I think if that drama had never happened, I think we would probably see more Amon-Ra at running back. But I feel like that happened, and then I think like the Lions probably saw that and was like, yeah, maybe we want to like dial back on how much we use him at running back because then we start getting into this weird contract negotiation thing where it's like, what do you pay him? And that's another reason. I mean, again, slightly different topic, but somewhat similar with the Jahmyr Gibbs thing. Like, as much as people keep talking about, like, yo, Jahmyr Gibbs is going to run routes and he's going to play a lot of wide receiver. He is, but they're also going to make him play running back a lot so that when it comes down to negotiating, he doesn't have much of a leg to stand on to be like, hey, this is why I should get wide receiver money. Um, Again, some of this is going to just be contract strategy. Obviously, you hope it doesn't like lead to like a loss of games or anything like that, but like it's going to happen. Like they're not going to just let him play wide receiver exclusively because they know if they do that, he'll come to him and his agent will come to the table and be like, "Yo, we want wide receiver money." Um, Let me get a few more of these questions, and I want to give you guys my quick thoughts on the Lions helmet, and then that'll probably be like the last thing before I get out of here. Um, Blue and Silver, I missed this comment saying people don't understand what Gibbs, Jamo, and Laporta will do for this offense. Call me crazy, but by the end of the year, I truly think the Lions will have the best offense in the league. Listen here, man. You won't get much argument out of me. I think if Gibbs and Laporta, specifically Laporta, if Laporta lives up to the hype that he's been creating in OTAs, if that continues, that's that's some spicy stuff right there, right? Because I know we all kind of look at the tight end position. We're like, well, the Lions did it by committee last year, and that's how they always want to do it. I don't think that's true, right? I think they would love to be more versatile. I think they would love to have more options for guys to work the middle of the field. And again, talking about going back to Amon-Ra St. Brown, having a Sam Laporta to operate out of the middle of the field gives Amon-Ra more opportunities to play on the outside. So maybe we see more of that. But I think the Lions have done a really good job of adding playmakers at every level and a bunch of guys that can take it to the house. Again, specifically looking at Gibbs and Jamo, but again, Laporta is fantastic after the catch. At least he was at Iowa. So if they can kind of continue to get that type of production, yeah, I don't think it's crazy. Um, I think the Chiefs will obviously still have something to say about that. You know, the Bengals will have something to say about that. Um, the Chargers, if they can ever stay healthy for an entire season, might have something to say about that. So the Eagles will have something to say about that. So yeah, it's not out of the realm of possibility. But again, I think the Lions should repeat at least as a top five offense, as long as Jared Goff can continue to do what he's been doing, or at least what he did last year. If he can continue that level of play, Huggy Bear, my guy. Hooker is more athletic than Goff, but he is also more athletic than Brady, Manning, Marino, etc. But he won't be better than them. Um, wait, but he won't be better than them nor better than Goff, in my opinion. Interesting. I would be interested in knowing. Okay, so do you just think so? You think he'll be more athletic, but he just can't play the position nearly as well, and that's a possibility, right? If he can never pick up the mental side of the game, it doesn't matter how big of an arm you have. It doesn't matter how athletic you are. If you can't read coverages, it's a mute point in the NFL. So I guess I get what you're saying. I think he's going to be great. I think this offense is going to be tailor made for him, whether Ben Johnson is here or not. I think you drafted a guy that you saw potential in. And I think they know what they have in Hendon Hooker or what they believe they can develop and cultivate in him. And I think they would heavily lean on that strategy and kind of do something similar to what they're doing with Jared Goff, where maybe it is just building on it year after year, to where he's finally at a stage where you feel very confident of what he is, on a mental side when attacking the game. Um, Depth Fan Man saying, so what positional group do we rank the worst within the division? Defensive tackle, maybe tight end. Um, for me, it's defensive tackle, right? The Packers still have Kenny Clark, right? So if the Packers still have Kenny Clark, they I think they probably have the best defensive tackle tandem. Um, yeah, I might go defensive tackle just because like that's the group that I'm the most unsure about. Um, tight end tight end is unproven, but I don't think by the end of the year it'll be the worst because I think if we want to say who probably has the best tight end is again, it's probably TJ, right? And over in Minnesota, Green Bay no longer has Tunyon. They have a bunch like they have some rookies. We have a rookie. The Bears have Cole Kmet. I don't I'm not bothered by Cole Kmet, but I know he's had moments and he's had these types of games where he's, you know, you know, shown himself to be a quality tight end. I just don't think so. It would probably again, if I had to rank it, I would go Minnesota and then the Lions because I just think Sam Laporta is going to be better than anything that anybody else has in the division. Um, Lion King asking, do I think the JMO suspension will be reduced? I don't. I think it should, but it won't. It should be reduced. You guys have heard my rant on the humble JMO situation, but this past week with the NFL kind of coming out and listen, whenever you have to clarify things and you're implementing new things, that is a telltale side to me that like you probably didn't teach it right the first time. But again, for the NFL to come back and be like, yeah, we're going to reduce his suspension without an appeal going forward, yeah, that would be admitting blame, and they're not going to do that. Like I said, they should, they won't. Um, but yeah, that's kind of my honest opinion on that. Um, all right, really quick, I want to give you guys my thoughts on the alternative helmets that dropped earlier this week. Um, I know some of you I put up the poll, the vast majority, I think there was like last I checked, there was like 128 votes. The vast majority of you guys like them or love them. I only gave you guys two options, right? Because I didn't want too many people riding the fence and being like, they're okay. Um, Around here, we pick sides. Either you love it or you hate it. Let's try not to ride the fence too much. But when it comes to these helmets, um, I have got to say I like them. I'm not gonna lie. I do. I kind of I'm a big fan of the blue. Um, when the Lions decided that like when the Lions said they were dropping new helmets, I really only had like one real like request or one thing that I was really kind of like, listen, just don't do chrome. I didn't say it publicly because I didn't want to even put it in the atmosphere, but I just didn't want them to do like some weird like chrome silver helmet that was going to be like really shiny. Like I did not. I wanted no parts of that. Um I was actually talking to my little brother and we were kind of just like spitballing like literally like an hour or so before the helmet dropped and he was like, "What do you think it'll be?" And I was like, he said he thought it would be like, he thought they might go with a black finish. And I was like, yo, if it's not black, let it be blue. And so the fact that we got the blue finish, I love. I love the 1960s lion logo. Um, I'm a little irked by people that don't like it because they feel like it's synonymous with losing. Listen, if you're gonna use that rhetoric, then I guess we might as well change the entire team's name, right? We might as well not even be the Detroit Lions because that's also synonymous with losing if we're gonna go that route. Um, but I like it. I really do. I think it's really clean. Um, I would prefer, again, if it wasn't something like this, I would have preferred like just a newer lion, right? Something that looks more menacing, something that's a little more intimidating. But this is perfect. I think this looks clean. My only gripe about this helmet, and I think some of you probably share the same thing, is that like they got to wear it with the grays. Like if they didn't have to wear it with the grays, this would be grand slam for me. This would be amazing. But I love everything about this helmet. If I had the money to blow on it, I would have got one and I would have it somewhere. I don't know. My wife wouldn't even, I'd have to like talk my wife into figuring out where I'd put it. But this gives me a lot of hope, right? We know the Lions get new jerseys next year. So this gives me a lot of hope of the direction that they're going to go into. That kind of lets us know that we're probably going to get another like all blue type of concept. Um, I I'm probably in that part of the fan base that would still love to see like a black jersey of some kind. Um, but if not, I'm as long as we don't have grays, like I would be perfectly fine with them getting rid of the grays and just having a blue version, a white version. And like I said, I would love a black version, but if not that, I don't know, find something else, but just let's not do gray because the grays I think were great in a concept, and then when we finally saw them, they don't look nearly as clean as I thought they would. Um, Def Fan Man saying these new helmets Really are the Greek yogurt of helmets though, just whelming. Listen, I like, and part of that, listen, part of me is just like, I'm happy to have something new. I like new things, and this looks great just from the simple fact that it's new. Um, but I mean, I get it if you could say that it's like the Greek yogurt of helmets. Super Saiyan Lion saying I hate that lion. Uh, Blue and Silver saying I like the white lion. Okay. Super Saiyan, he looks anorexic. Listen, I get that. All right. If you're like, yo, the lion's a little skinny, he looks like he hasn't, eaten a W in a while. I get it, right? That's why I say, like, in the future, like if they could get something that's a little more menacing, something that's just a little more, I don't want to say like quite like what the Jags have, but the beauty of like what the Jags and like kind of the Panthers have is like you can clearly see that that's a, it's a jungle cat, right? So I would love to see something like that with the Lions, where if it's just a lion's head, I'd be pretty cool with that. Um, Blue and Silver saying the MGM Grand Line would be dope, right? Anything of that stature where it's just, I don't know, something of that not of that ilk that just communicates, you know toughness and grit. Um, I heard Mike Valenti call it, I guess some people call it Bubbles the Lion. Yeah, Bubbles the Lion doesn't do that for me. And I guess to Super Saiyan Lion's point, the Slim Fast Lion doesn't do it for some people either. Um, Justin W saying very Egyptian. Yeah, I guess that's kind of what they probably were going for back in the 60s. Like I said, I like it. It's, some people call it the hood ornament logo. I think it looks pretty clean actually. Um, Blue and Silver saying the gray needs to be silver, and I still don't know how that would like come across on a jersey, right? Like I still feel like it's going to look like some form of gray. Um, but again, like Super Saiyan Lion saying, I agree. Like I would love to see the black jerseys, right, of some kind. Um, Again, this idea, like we as a fan base got to let go of some things of being like, well, that's synonymous with losing. Listen, this team has lost for a long time. If we're going to try to connect every little thing back to losing, then we'll never have much of anything. Like I said, we might as well rebrand everything about this team. No longer be the Lions. Let's find another animal. We can be the Detroit Platypuses or something. I don't know. But like I said, I think lions are awesome. It's probably one of my favorite animals. So um, like I said, I think we just kind of need to move on and accept the fact that, like, yo, this is our history, right? This is a history of a team that's, yeah, there's been a lot of down. But we've been fortunate the last couple of years to have a lot of more up and positive moments. Um, Def Man saying, admittedly, I'm opposed to revisiting the black unis. And listen, man, you're not the only one. There's a lot of people that are anti-black uniforms, and I get it. I just think black looks dope. Black and blue is just so clean. We're in the NFC North, black and blue division. It just kind of writes itself, Um, so that's kind of where, again, my love for the black. It honestly has nothing to do with like the original black jerseys. I just think black jerseys, especially all black. I first fell in love with like all black jerseys when the Baltimore Ravens had theirs. And I was like, that is clean. Black jerseys, black pants looks dope. And then they had the black helmet too. Like that just looks intimidating. Um, I would love that. I would love for the Lions to have something similar like that. And because they sell like the black helmet, the black and blue helmet makes me want it even more because like I at least see a helmet concept that makes me think like that looks clean. So I have to believe that you could come up with a uniform concept that would look just as dope. Um Doc Bob saying this design was in existence when they won championships. It just wasn't their official logo at the time. And that's okay. I'm glad you said that because, like I said, some people have been saying this, like, oh, that logo's synonymous with losing. But I'm like, I'm sure they won some championships while this logo was at least around. Maybe, like you're saying, it wasn't their main logo, it wasn't their official logo, but it was around during that time. Um, and yeah, Super Saiyan, like this was the very first thing I said when I saw the helmets, and this is before I knew they were going with the grays. I was like, yo, this helmet with the all whites would be perfect. And then Jeremy Reisman from Pride of Detroit, love that dude dearly, had to like ruin my high by saying, nope, they got to wear it with the grays. And I immediately came crashing down. So, um, Def Fan Man saying all blue color rush. I would be down for that, right? I feel like didn't they have an all blue color rush one year before we got the all gray ones? Yeah, go back to the all blues. I'm gonna read a couple more of these and I'm gonna get out of here because like I said, it's Friday. I want you guys to be able to enjoy your weekend. And I'm also hungry, so I want to get something to eat. Blue and Silver saying the black reminds me of Joey Harrington, but if they change the design, it would look dope. Yeah, I think so, right? Like I think there's so much more they can do with the uniform designs these days. So like I said, I've loved the all black since the Baltimore Ravens. If they could do something similar to that, the Eagles have a really dope all black. The Jets have a really good all black as well. So it can be done. I just, hopefully the Lions, whatever the Lions give us next year, like hopefully it's something that they clearly put a lot of thought into. So I would love to see that. And then Justin saying it should be Elton John on the helmet, Lion King. Can you feel the love tonight? Are you basically never mind, I don't even wanna go there. I had a comment that I'm not even gonna put out there, but, listen, man, I've appreciated you guys coming and hanging out with me today. Hope you guys enjoy your weekend. Like I said, Monday, if you missed the announcement earlier, Monday will be my last stream of the week before I go on vacation, but I have a guest, Mike Payton, formerly of Pride of Detroit, currently at A to Z Sports, will be coming by. So I'll get a chance to talk to Mike, talk about some Lions, have a couple questions for him. He's written some amazing pieces lately over at A to Z Sports. So I think we're gonna get into a couple of things that he's written about and just kind of just get his thoughts on the Lions and where they're currently going and how the 2023 season is shaping up for them. Um, Again, like I said, I'll be on vacation, but I'll be uploading some content, some stuff that I pre-recorded. So you guys will have to not see me for 2 weeks. But can't wait to get back. Can't wait to do some more Lions content with you guys. Talk some more Lions. Like I said, appreciate you all coming by and hanging out. Hit the like button on your way out. Share this video. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one. Later.